The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
I turn my mute button off. Welcome, everyone, to another episode with Chris S., who's on the line with us right now. Hey, Chris, what's going down?
Everything is really good out here on the East Coast, Monty. I hope everything's good with you.
It is. Last weekend, I was in Long Beach, California, taking the 12 steps to the Salvation Army down there. And what a great experience that was. Got to see the Queen Mary. I'd never seen it before.
Wow.
The rat-infested Queen Mary.
You know, Monty, I have a suggestion for you. You really should do a show just based on your experience with the Salvation Army and your experience with your interactions with them and the trajectory you see them headed in. That, you know, you and I have talked, and it's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it really is.
It is. It would be very easy for me to get some of the captains or even the commander of the West Coast on the show. We all hit it off so well. So that is a really good idea, and I think it's better than an idea. I think we definitely need to do it. Yeah. What a history. What a history the Salvation Army has. And even with Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Well, so I've seen people who have crunched a lot of numbers, and a few of them have said that if you add up in aggregate recoveries from alcoholism, Salvation Army has more than Alcoholics Anonymous.
Wow.
And when I first heard that, I'm like, no way, because it's more marginalized today. But it started in the 1800s.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's been plugging along. With its mission for over a century now, and you can add a lot of sober people up that have gone through that program, and you and I have been talking about some of the shifts that might be coming that really relate right back to the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah, indeed. I had no idea how huge the Salvation Army was or how far their reach was. They are the largest provider of residential recovery programs, what they call ARCs, Adult Rehabilitation Centers, in the world.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I had no idea.
No doubt. I mean, they're in every town with more than 15,000 people, you'll find one,
Yeah, the one in Pasadena, there's actually like 4 or 5 different facilities. And that's not including their thrift stores and stuff. You know what I mean? They do all sorts of work. They reach out to the homeless. They help people get jobs. They help people get their journeyman's license and their forklift certifications. I mean, they just do a bang up job. Well, what are we doing this week, buddy?
All right, so we have moved forward to October 1959. We are, of course, going over every single article that's published in the book Language of the Heart, which is basically Bill's Grapevine writings. And man, I have learned a lot. I've gained such a perspective on Bill, his thinking and the work and his mission with Alcoholics Anonymous, and his recovery philosophy, which I really line up with. You know what I mean? I really line up with the way this guy thinks, and and his belief systems and all of that. So I've become more of a Bill Wilson fan than I was before we started the show, and I'm really grateful. But tonight, the name of the article we're going to be covering is called "AA Communication Can Cross All Barriers." I have no idea what this article is going to be about. So let's jump in and start to see what Bill wants to communicate with us
All
here.
right.
Everyone must agree that we AAs are unbelievably fortunate people. Fortunate that we have suffered so much. Fortunate that we can know, understand, and love each other so supremely well. These attributes and virtues are scarcely of the earned variety. Indeed, most of us are well aware that these are rare gifts, which have their true origin in our kinship, born of common suffering and a common deliverance by the grace of God. Wow. Thereby we are privileged to communicate with each other to agree and in a manner not very often surpassed among our non-alcoholic friends in the world around us. So, he's talking about the common peril and the common solution. He's described it as we're like passengers of a shipwreck. We're all in the lifeboat together, and we form a camaraderie.
Yeah.
We all have a common purpose. Let's not drown, and so we work together, and that how. If this was the Rotary Club or the Mummers or something, maybe you wouldn't have that capacity, that connection with your fellow passenger that you do in Alcoholics Anonymous. But we get the opportunity to see people who do really well, and we see the opportunity to observe people that don't. And each day that goes by, I'm more and more grateful for my recovery. I'm more and more grateful. Life just keeps getting better. And so what he's talking about here, us being fortunate people. Who would think an alcoholic is fortunate? But when you're in the other side of recovery, it's easy to understand. You know what I mean?
One of the most powerful statements I ever heard in early recovery, or early on in the rooms, and I've never forgotten it. This gentleman said, "My greatest defect has become my most powerful asset." And I thought, wow, I want that. I want to take the thing that's been killing me and turn it around. The very thing that's been killing me is saving my life now,
So there's a giant shift in perspective as we recover. And
Yes.
the things that we thought were good, we end up realizing were bad. And the things we thought were bad, sometimes we end up realizing that they're good.
Yeah.
And one of the most important characteristics, I think, in recovery is to be able to have an open mind and be able to assess new information and new experience as it comes in, and change those cemented in belief systems that really
Yep.
haven't been doing us much good.
Yeah.
So from AA's very beginning, our success with each new prospect has always rested squarely on our ability to identify with him or her in experience, in language, and especially in feeling. That profound feeling for each other that goes deeper than words. This is what we really mean when we say one alcoholic talking to another. So I've had a couple of experiences over the last couple of weeks that I want to share with you, Monty, if I can.
Yeah.
I got a phone call from a good friend of ours who said, "Hey, would you talk to my girlfriend? I've got a really good friend, and it's turning out that her boyfriend is really suffering from the effects of alcohol. We think he's an alcoholic. He showed up. He showed up for a visit, and he was in the DTS. He was like flat detoxing from alcohol, and it was quite obvious to everybody. So I go, yeah, I'll talk to her. So this woman calls me up. Monty, in 20 minutes, I was able to explain to her what alcoholism was. What are the characteristics of alcoholism? How does it show up? What the recovery process for alcoholism is. Explain to her that if someone is detoxing when they separate from alcohol, it's best to have some medical surveillance. Go to an actual detox facility, and here's what you want to do after detox with the individual, and then I explained to her how to have that conversation. Because that's a tough conversation to have when
Sure.
somebody sits down with you, and kind of confronts you about your alcoholism. It's a tricky kind of thing to do. So I explained to her that the type of interventions I like are the invitational. And what those are is, you explain to the person what the conversation is going to be about. I want to talk to you. We want to talk to you. We're going to meet with you later, and this is going to be the subject matter. Like invitational instead of confrontational. You see the show Intervention, and they practically have handguns. You know what I mean? It's like drama, 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 drama. Well, there's a lot of people that are not gonna, respond well to
Ken
that type
Seeley,
of
Ken Seeley,
approach.
cover your ears.
Listen, hey, it's appropriate in certain situations. I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
knocking it.
but you're
I'm
right.
just saying,
You're right. It is. Yeah.
I believe that the majority of people, it's best just to have have a real fresh, real honest conversation
Yeah.
with them, and then set out the rules of the road. If you want to get help for your alcoholism, I'll do everything's forgiven. I'll do anything to help you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. We'll work it all out together. If if instead you choose to ignore this very serious health problem, and continue to drink, and see this as an overreaction or something, we're going to have to redefine our relationship. And a lot of times that type of a conversation is serious enough for someone to head toward. A lot of times they want to feel better anyway. By this time they've recognized alcohol as a problem. They just don't know what to do,
Yeah.
so 2 days later he was on the way to treatment. Here's another quick story. These are the two 12-step things I was involved with this week. Um, we're very close to a surgeon, and a surgeon is telling us the story. Very HIPAA compliant. I need to tell you, no names, no characteristics were described, nothing. But the individual showed up in the emergency room with a ginormous distended abdomen,
Oh boy.
like 14 months pregnant. The guy looked like, and they had to cut him open to see what was going on. They had no idea what was going on, and when they opened him up, they found a whole section of his lower intestines and his bowel black, dead. It was dead and rotting, right? And they're like, they can't understand this, Monty. They've never seen anything like this because the cardiovascular system is pumping like a garden hose. The heart is fine. Usually you'll see something like this with congestive heart failure or something. None of that was present, and they couldn't figure out what caused this. And so they went to the Google. The team went to the Google, and they found out that this is a condition that can be related to heavy alcohol consumption. So let's just say you drink 2 quarts of moonshine or something, on a Saturday night. You can do so much damage that you actually kill the blood vessels in your digestive system, and your digestive system dies
Wow.
because it's not getting oxygen. So that's what happened to this guy. So they had to take out, 15 feet of stuff
Oh my
and sew him
goodness.
back up. And if he survives, I'm going to get the team of guys together, and we're going to, one by one, we're going to pay him a visit in the hospital, Dr. Bob-esque. And
Wow.
those are the two things that were on my mind this week.
I had a grandfather. It was my grandfather on my dad's side that was he drank a minimum of a quart of vodka a day for years, and he had them hidden all over the house. I think he forgot where most of them that they were even there. Right? This guy's liver looked like a liver of a teenager. It had no damage. There was nothing, because they tried to intervene on him with a family friend who was a doctor, and he agreed, but they couldn't find anything wrong with him. There was nothing wrong with him. I mean, his brain was intact, everything. He finally died of what they considered old age, but the alcohol didn't play a part in it. Now, isn't that the weirdest thing you ever heard?
Bodies are resilient things, and there's a lot of different things to consider. When damage happens to the body, there's all kinds of interrelated connectivity between diet and blood type and genetics and everything else. So that doesn't surprise me. I've known smokers who smoked into their 90s, 3 packs a day, right into their 90s. But there's other people that get lung cancer in their 40s. We're each of us is a little bit different.
There's people that get lung cancer that's never smoked.
Yeah, second.
Isn't that a
very
trip?
true.
Yeah.
That's very true. All right, it says years ago, however, we found that the kinship of having suffered severe alcoholism was often not enough in itself. To cross all barriers, our channels of communication had to be broadened and deepened. Practically all of AA's first members were, for example, what we today call last gasp or low bottom cases. We oldsters, for the most part, were at the jumping off place. When the still mildly affected or high bottom cases began to turn up, they usually said, "But we were never jailed. We were never clapped into mental hospitals. We never did those horrible things you fellows talk about. Surely AA can't be for people like us." So he's moving into something that he talked about in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. There's language in the first step of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions that they had to raise the bottom. People started coming in who had not gone down the scale as far as those early members who were in end stage alcoholism. A lot of people were starting to show up who were not quite in end stage alcoholism yet. They probably could have made a couple more years. So really the decision was made. How do we help them? How do we make them welcome? And I'm really glad, that they didn't have a bouncer at the door that was qualifying you.
Yeah, right.
When I showed up. Anyway, for years we old timers simply couldn't communicate with folks like these. Somehow our transmission lines to them had to be increased in numbers and in power. Otherwise, we'd never get through. Out of much experience, a means and a method was developed. Interesting. To each new high bottom, we hammered home the verdict of noted doctors that alcoholism is a fatal and progressive malady. Then we would go back to those earlier periods in our drinking careers when we too were mild or seemingly not too serious cases ourselves. We would recall how very sure we were that next time we could control ourselves when we took a few drinks, or maybe how we rather admired the notion that, on occasion, unrestrained grog consumption was, after all, no more than a good man's fault. Or, in the next phase, how our dram consumption was the fault of unfortunate circumstances or the distressing behavior of other people. This much identification achieved, we'd proceed to regale the prospect with many a tale showing just how insidious and irresistible the progress of our illness had been, how years before we realized it, we had actually gone much beyond the point of no return. So far as our own resources of strength and will were concerned, we kept pointing out how right the doctors were. Slowly but surely, this strategy commenced to pay off. With the aid of the authority of medical science and by a better presentation, the low bottoms have begun to communicate at depth with the high bottoms. But this tedious process and its sparse results didn't have to go on forever. We joyfully discovered that the moment any AA locally was possessed of even a small group of high bottom drunks, then progress into this class of toper became progressively faster and easier. Today we know why. One high bottom can talk to another high bottomist nobody else could. So this segment of our fellowship grew and grew. It's probable that one half of today's AA membership has been spared that last 5, 10, or even 15 years of unmitigated hell that we low bottoms know all too well. This validates a theory I've had for a long, long time, Monty, and that is there's a scale in alcoholism. And we get worse and worse and worse. And a lot of people that show up in Alcoholics Anonymous are not very far down the scale. Now that does not mean that they're not alcoholic. It does not mean that they're not welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous. It just means that the people that I really related to, in my first several years in Alcoholics Anonymous were the people who, had gone down the scale as far as I had.
Agreed.
And, it was just, I understood them more. But Bill is opening the barn door to this thing really wide, and he did it very early on. He certainly did it in the 40s by making sure that low bottom drunks were welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what I mean?
So we had, I think you and I were the ones that had the discussion about treatment centers, like alcoholism, there's different degrees, just like in cancer, right?
Yeah.
And so if your cancer has leveled to a certain spot, you're going to be treated this way. If it's gotten worse, you're going to be treated this way. There's going to be different forms of treatment depending on where you are with your cancer. Just like there should be, but often isn't, in the treatment of alcoholism, right? Because you go into a program and the treatment is the same across the board, whether you're a high bottom or low bottom. And that's really not helpful. Right? Because you're serving one group of people, but not the other.
Yes. So if you're a business, you're going to try to do the things that get reimbursed for, and you're going to try to do the things that seem to help the most people.
Right.
So let's say you've got a lot of heavy drinkers in your treatment program. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe the majority of your census is heavy drinkers, and they wouldn't be considered alcoholic because they don't have the phenomenon of craving and the allergy to the body. Let's just say that. You're going to develop your treatment program to be helpful to the most people you can be helpful to. You're going to want the best numbers you can get, and you might be excluding the alcoholics. They might have no chance at all in your recovery process because what you're offering isn't the real spiritual mechanics that's going to change the person's personality, change their perspective, rewrite their belief systems, open them up to a new way of life. So the best possible treatment process is something that we don't do, and that's client-driven, outcome informed.
Yeah.
And what that is you have to have a buy-in from the client that they want help and that they're willing to be there and they're willing to do the work. You just do. So let's say you have that buy-in. You granularly assess the outcomes of everything you're doing and measure it and adjust your treatment processes to better fit that individual's particular needs. No, we don't do that because we have one counselor for every 25 people, but the right way to do it would be to really, really hone in on each specific case. What do they need? What do they need? They might need long term. They might need to be there a year. They might not need to be there. They might just need a good sponsor. So there's a varied experience. And if you have a cookie cutter approach where, well, we have phase one for the first 2 weeks, and then you go to phase two, and by the time you get through phase two, you're ready for phase three. Something like that isn't efficacious.
Right.
It's just
Right.
maybe it's churning out a bunch of recoveries, but are you doing the best thing you can for each
Yeah,
specific client?
you're molding the person to the program, not the program to the person, right?
Yeah.
When you're doing that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. I worked in a place like that, and it was just the opposite. They were given the spiritual side of it, but they weren't looking at the medical part of it, and then wondering why a person that had a real strong spiritual connection couldn't stop drinking because they hadn't addressed
Yeah,
the other side.
you aren't trying. You aren't trying. Well, if somebody says that to you, they don't understand alcohol.
They don't.
You know what I mean? It's crazy. And so there are places that do a much better job than others. Okay, I
Yep.
happen to have a commitment at one of them. They're really good. They've got a 28-day track. They've got a long-term track. They're medically supervised, but they are spiritually based.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing about the best they can for an American recovery type system. I think until the entire healthcare reimbursement process is completely revamped, I don't know that we're going to be doing much better than we're doing right now.
What you just said sounded like a title to an A&E documentary, American Recovery.
Yeah. Listen, there are countries that have learned from us what to do and how best to do it, to do a much better job than we do.
Yeah.
A much better job than we do.
That's so funny.
But anyway, that being said,
Yeah.
they can do it because the government funds all of it.
Right.
We have issues funding things for alcoholics and addicts. Anyway, since these first elemental problems of communication were solved, AA has taken on and has successfully communicated with every single area of life and living where alcoholics dwell. In the beginning, for instance, it was 4 whole years before AA brought permanent sobriety to even one alcoholic woman. Like the High Bottoms, the women said they were different. AA couldn't be for them. But as the communication was perfected, mostly by the women themselves, the picture changed, spread all over the globe. Our sister AAs must be 30,000 strong by now. The last statistic I saw, Monty, AA women make up 52% of Alcoholics Anonymous membership or something.
Wow.
They're the majority now. So it says, in like manner, this process of identification and transmission has gone on and on. The skid rower said he was different. Even more loudly, the socialite for Park Avenue, Stumblebum, said the same. So did the arts and the professions, the rich and the poor, the religious, the agnostics, the Indians and the Eskimos, the veterans and the prisoners. But nowadays, all of these and legions more soberly talk about how very much alike all of us alcoholics are when we all admit that chips are finally down, when we see that it is really a question of do or die in our wide world fellowship of the common suffering and the common deliverance. The common solution, the common deliverance, those are synonymous. Mm-hmm. Now, this is our yearly international issue of AA Grapevine. Here we feature the news and views of our far-flung and treasured groups beyond the seas, who today return to us in double measure the inspiration that years ago we tried to send to them. In those days, there was a problem of communication indeed. Could we possibly identify ourselves by mail, by our literature, and its then scarce translations, and through random AA travelers abroad? By 1950, we weren't any too sure. So Lois and I wondered a lot as we headed for Europe and Britain to see for ourselves in that wonderful year. Could AA really and fully transcend all of those formidable barriers of race, language, religion, and culture, all of those scars of wars, recent and ancient, all of those kinds of pride and prejudice of which we knew we had our share in America? What about the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Danes, and the Finns? What about the Dutch, the Germans, the French, and the English, and the Scots, and the Israelis? How about the Africans, the Boers, the Aussies, the Latins, the Japanese, the Hindus, the Mohammedans, and of course the Eskimos? Could AA finally cross all of the very barriers that had, as never before, divided and shattered the world of our time? So I'm gonna break in here. Over the years I've been friends with this guy who used to do just really high net worth interventions, and then he would manage the person's treatment. As no matter where they were, he would be the guy that would be overseeing the treatment, and he was called in because one of the Saudi royal family was an alcoholic. Now you aren't even allowed to drink in Saudi Arabia, I don't think. But is that really going to stop us? I was
Yeah.
13 drinking all the time. So he went over there and he had to meet with one of the higher ups in the family. They wanted to know what the heck he was going to be doing, or what was this going to look like, and he brought the book Alcoholics Anonymous. He brought a translation of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and this high religious leader read it, handed it back to him. He had no idea what the reaction was going to be. Handed it back to him and said, "I see absolutely no problem with this. This lines right up with the Muslim faith." And he was really surprised about that. But
yeah.
but the book is a spiritual book. You know what I mean? And that individual went on to get help. The spiritual 12-step abstinence-based help.
Yeah. Wow.
So the moment we alighted in Norway, we knew that AA could and would go everywhere. We understood not one word of Norwegian, and translators were sometimes scarce. Scenes and customs alike were new and strange to us, yet there was a marvelous communication from the first moment. There was an incredible sensation of oneness, of being completely at home. Norwegians were our people. Norway was our country too. They felt the same way about us. It shone in their faces. They reached our hearts. As we journeyed from land to land, it was the same everywhere. In Britain, we were accepted as Britons. In Ireland, we were at one with the Irish. Everywhere it was the same. It was so much more than minds cordially meeting minds. It was no simple and merely interesting comparison of mutual experiences and aspirations. This was much, much more. This was the forming of heart to heart in wonder, in joy, and in everlasting gratitude. Lois and I then knew that AA could circle the globe, and it has.
Wow.
So this is 1950. He went around to all these different countries, on a pilgrimage. You know what I mean? I think that is so cool.
This thing that I kept envisioning was if a bomb hit your neighborhood, right? 99.9% of us that survived it would be looking for survivors, or we'd hear screams and we'd go after that person to help them. Right? All of a sudden, all political agendas, all viewpoints about everything and anything are gone. Our main focus is how can we reach the other person who needs help? And that, so it doesn't matter what country, it doesn't matter what your upbringing is, it doesn't matter what your opinions is on race, religion, or lack of religion. When there's a malady, a common malady, right? Isn't it interesting there's a common solution? And it comes about not by picking apart everybody's opinions about stuff that when it comes down to the bomb in your neighborhood doesn't really matter to nothing. It comes about because we care about each other. And you can take the most staunch, opinionated, liberal or conservative and hit that bomb in their neighborhood, and I'll bet you they're looking for a way to help one another.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There's something within our nature.
There is.
To respond to other people when they're in trouble, and I think Alcoholics Anonymous it can grab that nature and and develop it and help it. And that's like our 12th step. Organically we are driven with a recovery experience. We're driven to try to be helpful to other alcoholics. It's not even something we think about. We're just available.
We're doing it. Yeah.
We're watching for it, and when it's appropriate and available, we are there, and we will take the time needed to be of help. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for us, no more proof will ever be needed. Should any AA still doubt, he ought to have heard the sweet and stirring story told me only last week. Here it is. It's about a small English-speaking AA group in Japan. More properly, it's about two of its members, two Japanese who can't understand a word of English. It should also be known that the rest of the group, the English-speaking, don't know a word of Japanese. The language barrier is complete. The two Japanese have probably read a translation of the 12 steps. That's about all. For months now, the two Japanese have not missed a meeting. They are bone dry too. So there they sit in the meeting place, their faces wreathed in beautiful smiles. Their concentration on every speaker is intense. They act as though they savor and understand every word that is said. Those English words, as words, are still without meaning. Yet these speakers and that meaning are nevertheless full of meaning for them. We all know why. The speakers are talking far more than English. They are speaking the universal language of deep and abiding brotherhood, the language of the heart.
Wow.
The once lonely and solitary Japanese are no longer alone. They see, they feel, they understand. And thank God, so do all the rest of us. So, there's a connection that we have. We don't necessarily have to understand what the person is saying to understand the person, and it's remarkable. I would love to know more about Bill's trip. There's been books written about his motorcycle adventure, and there's been biographies and everything. I wish there was a travel diary or something that he put together on his his visits to these different countries and his experience with some of the first AA groups in those countries.
You could call it the Hitchhiker's Guide to other AA meetings in other countries.
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to Europe or something.
Yeah. Wow. The once lonely and solitary Japanese are no longer alone. So you can say that about anybody. The once lonely and solitary Swede, the once lonely and solitary Eskimo or whatever, the once lonely and solitary agnostic or atheist are no longer alone. They see, they feel, they understand, and thank God, so do all the rest of us. And there lies the key. And so do all the rest of us, right? We're all in this boat, and sit down, you're rocking it.
That is so great.
Yeah, right on, buddy. Good show. All right, my friend, let's see. Next week, after 25 years is the name of the article. We'll see what that's about on our next episode. All right, my friend. Thank you so much. Listeners, if you would like to comment, please comment. If you'd like to send an email, our email address is take12radio@comcast.net. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man along with Chris S. and the rest of the Take 12 Recovery Radio family wishing God's serenity for you. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.